Good morning. It is 9:08 a.m. on Sunday, February 16th, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. If you hear a slight tearing sound in the background, it might not be picked up on the microphone. It is my little dog tearing up his puppy pad. Yep, I'm talking about you. I will give you a sneak preview at the end if you would like to see the little corgi puppy. Anyway, because it's Sunday, I'm continuing my rewatch of Cowboy Bebop with Session 20, Pierrot Le Fou. This is another one of the episodes that I think lingers in my brain the most when I think of Cowboy Bebop. It's just, I think in particular, that Mad Pierrot is one of the... Little boy. Mad Pierrot is one of the few... So, let me just briefly tangent. One of the things that is true about Cowboy Bebop, and is often, in my experience, true with sort of found family narratives in general, is that more often than not, it is the main characters who are more interesting, and often the villains are less interesting by comparison. And a good example of that, for example, is Vicious, I think, who is essentially defined by being awful, and that there's not really that much more to know about him. He's not really very interesting. But that's fine, because we don't actually want to spend a lot of time with him. We want to spend time with our good guys. Right? But by and large, if you think back to the various antagonists over the course of the series so far, most of them are in a fairly narrow spectrum of just some stupid criminal to someone who's slightly more entertaining, but mostly still a stupid criminal, right? And then there's a few exceptions, but in particular, there are, I don't think, any of the other villains that are even remotely as interesting or as unsettling as Mad Pierrot. There's just so much that's cool about him. I mean, in some ways you could say he's a little bit like a pastiche of a variety of other sort of villainous characters, but boy, the combination just lands in my brain and sticks there and won't go away. Like the sound of his gritting teeth. And so he's just such a memorable opponent for Spike that this episode just really lingers for me. It's one of the, I think, my favorite episodes from that perspective. So let's, we begin the episode just with, the first introduction to Mad Pierrot, and then Spike's encounter with him. But so let's talk about this guy. First of all, there's a fascinating contrast between the fact that he seems to be, at least superficially, an extremely overweight man. With his coat closed, he's like almost a sphere with just a head and little feet sticking out. But we see later that that's to some extent a little bit of an illusion. Like he is heavy set, but he is not actually, his coat is full of weapons. Excuse me. But the apparent size is contrasted by the fact that he floats around like a soap bubble, and that, pairs with the round shape, but, is contrary to what we would expect someone of that size to, the way that person would move. And floating around, it's just such a strange, unnatural way of moving that nonetheless seems to be very natural and easy for him, and but it's so strange. Then, of course, we've got, the fancy sort of debonair outfit, and that paired with just the wild-eyed manic grin and the gritting of the teeth. The gritting of the teeth is such a good detail. And then, of course, firing a gun out of his cane is, it's just the cherry on top. It's not something that's never been done, but boy, it's just a very cool character design. And so we see him pretty easily take out a bunch of security people to assassinate the person they're protecting. We don't really know anything about who they are at this point. But we see that Spike basically had just been playing pool and just randomly happens across this scene, and Mad Perot immediately starts shooting back at him. And this is one of I think the only times in this series that we show Spike just clearly outmatched on every level. We know how great Spike is in terms of combat and hand-to-hand and guns and all of that. Like, he's very good, but Mad Perot just has him beat. Just every move he makes is countered. And excuse me. Spike literally only gets away because Mad Perot sees an alley cat and just freaks out and starts shooting at the cat. And so Spike would have been killed. And so that is our, every classic iconic villain needs some sort of an Achilles heel, right? And Cats is this guy. This is right out of superhero playbook, super villain. So, Spike, we see it's so it's fascinating in the show. I think that's what makes this episode stand out so much, is that our hero Spike is so uber competent at everything that to see him so clearly trounced and escaping only by the skin of his teeth in this first encounter, and then even only surviving with many injuries, it's strange. It upsets our expectations in the status quo of the episode. That, Spike barely gets away, heavily injured, and he didn't manage to so much as scratch this guy. So, we then have a couple of interesting bits. Once again, we have Jet manages to, with one of his old cop buddies, get a little bit of an inside scoop. This is Mad Perot. This is a name that it seems like Jet knows. He's been trying to kill high-level ISSP directors. That's the space police, basically. Kill a bunch of these high-level directors, and there's not a bounty on him because they don't want people to know he exists. And so that is an interesting element, because this is, and it plays into this next bit. Excuse me. Because there is no bounty on him. So when Spike receives this invitation, come and join the party, why? Why should he? Why should he go? Right? Like, what reason does Spike have to go? To go and face this clearly extremely dangerous individual again, while injured? We have, when he's laying on the couch, all wrapped up in bandages again, somewhat reminiscent of, a couple of earlier encounters, where, Faye calls him a mummy, and basically, I was going to say teases, but that's not real. Admonishes is really more right word, is like, you keep getting yourself in situations like this. And then when Ed gets the message, the invitation from Mad Perot, tells Faye about it first, who says that they shouldn't show it to Spike. Because as we just talked about, there's no good reason for Spike to want to go. Faye nonetheless intuits that he will go, despite there being no good reason to do it. And she was hoping to keep it from him instead. Unfortunately, he's, standing right behind her, because of course he is. And he jokes, maybe this is the time that I'll die. Maybe you'll come and rescue me. But at the same time, like, I think when we analyze who Spike is as a character, this idea of, oh, maybe this is the time I'll die, kind of not a joke. Because if we think about it, Spike is kind of looking for the end, right? Like, he's not just going to, like, you know, take his own life, but he's clearly adrift, right? We see how he doesn't care about hardly anything except, you know, Julia and Vicious, and everything else is kind of, he's sort of glib about, and he's acting glib about this, but being so thoroughly trounced physically in his fight has awakened something in Spike, that there's this element of a challenge unmet, but also maybe a release. If he were to lose, someone could do it. You know, it's him. Little boy. I'm sorry about the coughing. Less sorry about the barking. This is my life now. Buddy, come on now. But in any event, Rocket, quiet, buddy. So, Spike does go, right? And he goes, and it's at this abandoned amusement park. It's very reminiscent of like the end of the Batman, the Killing Joke, which also takes place in a abandoned amusement park like that. And since Mad Perot certainly has Joker elements there, I think there's some deliberate parallels there. In addition to it being a very creepy sort of atmosphere, that whole setting. And there's so much fun detail, like the fact that this amusement park's in a crater, but because it's only a partially terraformed world, you see the atmosphere processors spilling the air over the edge of the crater in the long shot. The amusement park itself has a lot of the standard sorts of things in it, but the creepy calliope music and the distortions of sort of famous Disney characters. And of course, lots of fun little details, like when Spike busts through a backstage door and he's in parts of the ride that you're not supposed to go. Just little details like cutesy little Cupid hologram appearing and saying, "Oh, it's dangerous back here. You're not allowed. Let's go play outside." And, and just following him around. And it's just, the fun little details there, so obviously there's lots of action in them chasing each other around. Spike is just constantly on the defensive. He cannot even manage to catch his footing. And then finally he was about to go down again when Faye does come to save him. Now, she's just as outmatched, so she's immediately, her little fighter craft is immediately shot down. She crashes. She's okay, but not helping anymore. But it bought Spike a crucial moment. And in the meantime, and then, so he's about to be killed again when a little toy cat once again causes Mad Perot to have an utter freak out. So this is all paired with us learning through Jet and Ed the backstory of how Mad Perot came to be. And it's Clockwork Orange style or, MK Ultra style government experiments to create the perfect assassin. And, it's very tropey stuff, but it's effectively presented, I think. And he's, showing that, it was very effective, but he was clearly insane. But such a fun little detail, though, that just like in the observation window, there was always this cat staring at him. And so now whenever he sees a cat, it makes him flash back to all the pain of those experiments. And that's why he freaks out. And pointing out that he's kind of like regressed to the mind of a child. And so there's, as Jet says, there's nothing as pure and as cruel as children. And, it's like, all of that is just really efficiently and well told. It's tropey stuff, but again, it's just, it's executed well, right? So we have a last little couple of exchanges. Spike manages to get to his feet, but then Pierrot shoots the gun out of his hand. The parade is coming forth between the two of them. And then there's a moment just before Spike is about to throw his last throwing knife where his eyes look like the cat's eyes. It makes Pierrot hesitate just enough that Spike, despite getting another bullet in his shoulder, manages to land the throwing knife in Mad Pierrot's leg, bypassing the shield because of the momentary distraction, presumably. And this is where we get the disturbing but fitting end for that Mad Pierrot character, is that, as lethal and dangerous as this guy was, he has the mind, this unhinged mind of a child. And when he's actually hurt and bleeding, like the knife in his leg, we've seen the way he fights. He clearly physically could easily keep going. He doesn't even walk on his legs. He floats around. But the pain, the real pain that he hasn't felt in a long time, immediately sends him, just falls on his back and starts sobbing and calling for his mommy. And he's just utterly taken out of the fight by a little pain. And then, he's just and he can't even bring himself to move out of the way as one of these enormous parade animatronics stomps through and then just crushes him. And thus ends the tale of Mad Pierrot. So it's obviously just like a little bottle episode, and the characterizations that it has for Spike and for Faye are the only ones that really have any sort of like meaningful stuff going on. Are nuanced, right? It's subtle. The episode is not heavy-handed with it. But again, it's just this element of Spike, despite having no rational reason to chase after Mad Pierrot, does so anyway because he is compelled, apparently, to seek out anyone who might be able to end his pain. Meanwhile, Faye, who protests so often that she doesn't care about any of these guys, nonetheless tries to keep Spike from seeing the invitation because she knows he'll go, but wants to protect him, but then goes into danger herself to rescue him afterwards. And then, of course, like I said, Mad Pierrot is just such a fascinating, interesting bad guy. And so this is one of my favorite episodes just because it's, the imagery from it just lingers. Like the sound of Pierrot's gritting, scraping teeth. All right, so we'll leave it there. And I will talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes, but I did promise Puppy who is torn up his little pee pad. Rocket, are you a good boy? Yes, you are. You're a good boy, even if you tore up your pee pad. All right. Talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.